significance of color in our everyday lives and how it, especially regarding the academic environment. So color is more than just aesthetics. There's color all around us, affecting our perceptions and daily lifestyle. So different colors actually have different wavelengths, affecting our brain, physical body, and behavior in various ways. So for example, red light increases our heart rate while blue light decreases it. So the fact that color affects us leads to my proposition that neutral colors in a school environment limit students' academic performance. So I have two supporting points, and my first one is that the color scheme of school interior designs consists of a narrow selection of colors and has negative impacts on learning. So the realist example I can give is our classroom walls. The colors are gray, and I've also observed that many classrooms on this campus are either gray, off-white, cream, or any color in that basic color spectrum. And so Bonnie Crims, an architectural color consultant, stated in School Planning and Management that color choices in schools are usually up to administrators and maintenance departments, and that a lot of walls just end up being white, which can lead to understimulation. And most of these schools tend to stick with their neutral colors because of the traditions and the Old Faithful color selections. So there are many negative effects of these colors. So biologically, these neutral colors in a study environment can actually distract our vision. So Catherine J. Group, a certified color designer and internationally accredited interior designer, claimed that white paint on classroom walls can actually constrict our pupils, causing a distraction to vision because of the highlight reflectance of the white paint. So obviously, if students' visions are not as clear as it could be, then they will find difficulty in focusing when learning. And there are also emotional effects of these colors. So Professor Harry Wolforth from the University of Alberta claimed that humans tend to turn inward in monotone environments, which actually can induce feelings of anxiety, fear, distress, depression, boredom, and just like stress. So if students are in this study environment with such a negative and pessimistic mindset, they would most likely be distracted by these gloomy feelings, causing restlessness, uneasiness, irritation, and a lack of motivation in their study. So my second supporting point is that a broader selection of colors within the study environment will stimulate thinking and performance. So colors help students maintain a positive mood during learning, and if students are in a brighter mood, in a brighter atmosphere, they would most likely be able to participate and be more willing to study, and this positive mood could be a source of motivation. So for example, orange is stated to be mood lifting, welcoming, and comforting, and green is stated to induce feelings of calmness and peace. So when colors are used to emphasize certain features, learners' attention increases. So using colors in a study session will produce higher levels of contrast, which can also influence memory retention. So the Encyclopedia of Memory and Memory Disorders, written by Carol Turkington and Joseph Harris, states that intensely visualizing colors can help in development of visual memory. And so various studies and experiments demonstrate that a conversion of colors in schools improves focus and study performance. So Henry Ford, the founder of the Ford Car Company, did a study using the concept of focus walls, which is when the side and front walls in a classroom are painted in accent color. And based on the results of that experiment, the students were able to focus directly on the tasks in front of them and were able to maintain progression in advance of their supervisors. So that means students were able to work more efficiently on their tasks. And another study that demonstrates this is that Harry Wolforth did a study on 1983 on 4 elementary schools. And so basically those schools changed their lighting and color from neutral to brighter colors. And based on those results, there were large improvements in academic performance and increase in the students' IQ scores as well. So we can also infer that this would raise grades as well. So therefore, these points support my proposition that neutral colors limit students' academic performance. Thank you.
Well, it took a little bit to get to the actual claim. When you got there, I was much relieved because I was worried that this was going to turn into an informative speech about the influence of colors. You do actually have an argument about the problem with neutrality of colors in the classrooms, and I think that that works well at turning this into a claim of fact and perhaps providing us with some conflict. There's not really a preview of what the supporting structures are going to be, although it's largely easy to assume that you're saying, well, we have these dull, colorless situations, and that the color ones would get us better results. I think that that makes sense. Those would be the points that would be part of your speech. So it's not a surprise that that second point follows up. On your first point, you kind of are relying on examples on campus, and that's a reasonable start. I think that's something that most people can relate to. And then there's some general criticism of the neutral colors from so-called color experts, and I think that that's okay. It's a little bit vague. None of that is quantifiable. It's sort of speculative. Oh, their eyes might constrict. Their pupils might look a particular way, or they turn inward. That sounds a little abstract, to make your point. I'm not saying it's not true, but I don't know that there's any way that I could look at that and say, how would somebody dispute such a thing? It's like, well, maybe it causes you to turn inward, but others, they become creative. Maybe that would be the argument there. If inwardness it stimulates creativity, maybe that's the answer that the response speaker is going to come up with. I hadn't thought about that until just now. The second part of your argument suggesting that a broader color scheme would stimulate thinking, I think you do a little bit better on this, although both at the beginning of the speech when you're talking about reds and blues, and then in this section when you talk about orange and greens, those are all presented as presuppositions. There's no evidence that suggests that they have any of the effects that you've described. If there is evidence that suggests that, it needs to be included in the speech, and we don't get that. The best piece of information that you have is that last study that talked about the experience in the classrooms and how it had these long-term benefits. That is, of course, a 46-year-old study that we're looking at here. And I'm doing my math right in my head. It's a long time ago. Maybe not 46, maybe it's 36. Maybe I got a decade off there. Shouldn't ever do math in front of people. It's one of those places where you screw up and ruin your credibility. So I've got this one study from 36 years ago that found a relationship. And I'm going, well, if this was found true in 1983 and it improved the IQ, how come all those bright kids didn't go out and make sure that all the other classrooms got colored? What follow-up is there on this? It seems like it's a very brief piece of information. It doesn't mean that it's not a good piece of information, but is it sufficient to reach the conclusion that you're talking about? And I think you need a little bit more on that. I thought that you did a pretty good job building a case that suggests that the neutral colors are problematic and that there is a reason to believe that other colors might have some benefit. I'm just not sure I could say how strong a case it is and how big an impact it's going to have. All right, thank you.